It began without a sound. Deep beneath the lunar dust, it was there. A crystal of impossible size lay buried. It had slept for ages in the cold dark. Now, something stirred within its core. It started to hum a silent song, a song that traveled faster than light itself. The call went out across the star-strewn void. It was a note of pure energy. It passed through planets like a ghost. It ignored the pull of suns. It was a summons from a forgotten power. On Earth, no one knew. Humanity slept through the first whisper of the end. But the whisper was not for them. Not yet. Something else heard the crystal's call. Far away in the deep black, it answered. The hum was a key. It was turning a lock billions of miles away. Back on the moon, the crystal pulsed. Its light was a soft blue glow. It illuminated a cavern of perfect, smooth stone. The artifact had waited long enough. The time for judgment was near. You remember the sky being clear that night. A few scattered clouds drifted by. Then your comm unit buzzed with a tone you had never heard. It was a priority one alert. Not from your superiors, but from a level far above them. The message was simple. It contained a set of coordinates and a single command to move. Now you were a specialist in deep space anomalies. Your work was mostly theory. It was endless papers on things that might exist. But this was not theory. You were flown to a hidden launch pad. A sleek, black shuttle waited for you. There were no press. There were no politicians. There were only quiet men with serious faces. And they were all looking at you. Your destination was a secret. It was a moon base so deep, it was never on any map. They called it Station Echo. Down there, the air was cold and recycled. The walls were bare metal. General Thorne met you at the airlock. His face was grim. He pointed to a massive screen. A single colossal object was displayed. It was responding to the crystal's hum. That hum that had woken you up. That hum that had brought you here. The tactical display was a cold blue. It showed a map of the solar system. Everything was normal, except for the one glaring intruder. General Thorne's voice was low. He confirmed the object's origin point. It came from outside the galaxy, a place we had only dreamed of seeing. The object was a vessel, and it was now inbound to Earth. Its trajectory was perfect. It was a straight line to our world. There was no deviation. There was no hesitation. This was not an exploration ship. It was a messenger, or a weapon. The screen showed its estimated size. It eclipsed any starship humanity had ever built. Our largest carriers looked like toys beside it. The room was silent. The weight of that fact crushed the air out of your lungs. Humanity was a child playing with stones. We had just learned to throw them into the pond. This vessel was a tidal wave. It was coming to swallow the pond itself, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. The ship was not accelerating. It was simply arriving, as if it had always been on its way. You were brought before the crystal. It rested in the center of the containment chamber. Its hum was louder here. It vibrated in your bones. It felt ancient and deeply intelligent. The scientists told you to place your hand upon it. They said it was trying to communicate. They had no idea what a terrible truth they were about to uncover. You reached out. Your fingers brushed the cool, smooth surface. The moment you made contact, the world vanished. It was replaced by a wave of pure information. A vision flooded your mind. You saw not one ship, but a fleet of world-destroying ships. They moved through the cosmos like a plague. Their design was brutal and efficient. You saw them arrive at other worlds, worlds teeming with life. worlds of incredible beauty and complexity. The ships did not land. They did not speak. They simply opened fire. Beams of incandescent light lashed out. They cracked planets open like eggs. Civilizations vanished in a silent flash. It was a slaughter on a cosmic scale. And this fleet was the one now heading for Earth. The vision shifted. You were no longer seeing through your own eyes. You were seeing through the crystal's memory. It showed you the masters of the fleet. They were beings of pure energy and logic. They existed within crystalline shells, much like the one you were touching. They called themselves the Arbiters, or more formally, the Elder Ones. They had existed for eons. They saw themselves as cosmic gardeners. They tended the universe by pruning it. They sought out and judged any species that showed potential for widespread conflict. Their goal was a universe of perfect silent order. Any world that dreamed of war was a weed to be pulled. They had judged countless worlds before. Our world was simply the next on their list. You saw their faces in your mind. They were not faces of flesh and blood. They were shifting patterns of light. They were equations given form. There was no malice in them. There was no anger. There was only the cold, unyielding certainty of their purpose. They were the perfect judges, because they felt nothing at all. Their judgment was absolute. You pulled your hand away from the crystal. The vision shattered. You were back in the cold chamber on the moon. General Thorne and the scientists stared at you. Your face was pale. You were trembling. You opened your mouth to speak. But what could you say? How do you tell the world that its judge and jury has arrived, and that the verdict was decided long ago? The news was relayed to Earth's leaders. Panic was not an option. It was a luxury they could not afford. The Arbiter fleet was weeks away. Humanity had no starships to meet them. We had no weapons that could scratch their hulls. We were utterly and completely outmatched. Our extinction was a mathematical certainty. A desperate plan was formed. It was a gamble of the highest order. The crystal was our only link to the Arbiters. It was their technology. It was their language. If we were to plead our case, it had to be through the crystal. But no ordinary mind could withstand its power. The visions would shatter any normal consciousness. But you were not normal. You had seen their truth and survived. The decision was made. You would become humanity's voice. You would be our diplomat, our defense attorney, our Hail Mary pass in the final seconds of the game. You would connect with the artifact again, not just to see, but to speak. You would go inside the crystal's network, a ghost in their machine. Your consciousness would be the last weapon of a doomed world. They prepped you for the immersion. The chamber was sealed. The scientists gave you a final, hopeful look. General Thorne gave you a grim nod. He knew the odds. He knew what they were asking of you. You were to become a living sacrifice. A single voice to scream into the void, hoping that something out there would listen, and maybe, just maybe, change its mind. You placed your hands on the crystal. This time, you did not pull away. You pushed your mind into it. You let the wave of energy consume you. The physical world dissolved. You were pure thought. You were adrift in a sea of light and data. And then you heard them, the whispers of the dead. The crystal was not just a communication device. It was a graveyard. It held the final thoughts of every race the Arbiters had extinguished. It was a chorus of ghosts. Billions of voices crying out in a final moment of terror and disbelief. You heard their art, their music, their final prayers to gods that could not save them. You felt their surprise, their shock at the sudden, overwhelming violence. These were not all warlike races. Some were peaceful philosophers. Some were curious explorers. But the arbiters had found a single thread of potential conflict, a single dark thought in a billion minds. And for that, they were condemned. The ghost chorus wept for their lost homes. And they warned you. They warned you of the cold logic to come. You pushed deeper into the network. You wanted to understand your enemy. You wanted to know why. The crystal granted your request. It showed you the core logic of the arbiters, their prime directive. It was simple, it was brutal, and it was flawless in its execution. They believed that life was a wildfire. If left unchecked, it would consume the galaxy in chaos and war. They had seen it happen. Long ago, a great war had torn the universe apart. A war between powerful, star-faring races. The arbiters were the survivors. They had vowed to never let it happen again. They would be the firebreak. So they created their system. They would watch a young species. They would observe its development. They would scan its art, its history, its collective mind. If they found a significant potential for interstellar warfare, they would act. They would eliminate the species before it could become a threat. Their logic was absolute. It was without mercy. It was a preventative measure on a genocidal scale. They were not evil. They were gardeners, and humanity was a weed. You felt the crushing weight of their certainty. It was a wall of pure, cold reason. How could you argue against it? Humanity was a species defined by conflict. Our history was a long, bloody story of war. We built bigger and better weapons. We dreamed of conquering the stars. By their own flawless logic, we deserved to be extinguished. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Our own nature was our death sentence. But you did not give up. You were human after all, and defiance was in your blood. You searched through the endless data streams of the crystal. You looked for a loophole, a flaw, a single crack in their perfect, ancient code. For days, you swam in the ghost chorus. You listened to their final moments. You learned from their extinction. And then you found it. It was not in their logic. Their logic was perfect. It was not in their technology. Their technology was supreme. The flaw was in their experience. The arbiters had judged thousands of worlds. But all those worlds had one thing in common. They had either fought back with force or they had surrendered in fear. They had reacted as the arbiters predicted. They had fit neatly into the equation of doom. The system of judgment was ancient. It was powerful, but it had a blind spot, a single exploitable flaw. It had never encountered a species that refused to choose, a species that would not fight, but would not surrender either, a species that would argue, a species that would demand to be heard. The system was not designed for a debate. It was designed for a verdict. And you were about to lodge a formal objection. The arbiters understood logic. They understood mathematics. They understood the physics of a dying star. But they had never met a race like humanity. They had catalogued our wars. They had recorded our violence. But they had missed something crucial. They did not comprehend defiance born from hope. They did not understand courage in the face of certain death. They saw our art as primitive, our love as a chemical reaction, our hope as a statistical anomaly. They were a species of pure intellect. They had purged themselves of emotion eons ago. They saw it as a weakness, a flaw in the design of lesser beings. They could not possibly understand a species that drew its greatest strength from that very flaw. You realized their greatest weapon was also their greatest weakness, their cold, unfeeling logic. It made them predictable. It made them rigid. They could not account for the unpredictable chaos of the human heart. They had all the data, but they had none of the understanding. And that was the crack in their code, the key to our survival. You were going to show them what it meant to be human, even if it killed you. You gathered your thoughts. You prepared your argument. You were no longer a passive observer in the crystal network. You became an active participant. You pushed back against their cold logic. You took control of the data stream. And you began to broadcast. You showed them everything. You sent them the image of a doctor healing an enemy soldier. You sent them the sound of a crowd cheering for a heroic act. You sent them the story of a parent sacrificing everything for their child. You showed them our art, our music, our poetry, our ridiculous, illogical, beautiful, and messy existence. You showed them our capacity for great evil, but you also showed them our infinite capacity for good. You did not hide our flaws, you embraced them. You showed them our wars, our hatreds, our fears, but you framed them as lessons learned, as struggles that made us stronger. You showed them that for every act of destruction, there was an equal and opposite act of creation. You were not just defending humanity. You were explaining it. You were teaching the soulless gods what it meant to have a soul. You showed them our will to survive, our stubborn refusal to lie down and die. The response was silence. For a time, you thought you had failed. The data stream felt empty. The ghost chorus was still. But then you felt a subtle shift in the network, a flicker of something new. It was not acceptance. It was not anger. It was confusion. The arbiters were processing your message, and for the first time in 1,000,000 years, they did not have an immediate answer. Then, the final act began. The immense fleet arrived in Earth's orbit. They appeared without a sound. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, it was filled with their monstrous ships. They blotted out the sun. They cast long, dark shadows across the continents. They were colossal. They were silent. They were judgment at the door. On the surface, panic erupted. The world held its breath. This was it. The final moment. The leaders in their bunkers could only watch. The soldiers at their posts could only wait. Everything was still. The world braced for the inevitable fire from the heavens. The end had come. It was as terrible and as final as you had seen in the vision. But the fire did not come. The ships just hung there, motionless, silent. They darkened Earth's skies. Their weapons were charged, their systems were ready, but they did not fire. The final verdict was imminent, yet it was delayed. Something was holding them back. Something you had done. Your message had reached the Arbiter flagship. It had bypassed the lower command systems. It went straight to the top. To the Elder, one, in command of the entire fleet. You had sent it a paradox, a logical contradiction that it could not solve. You had shown it that hope was not a weakness. It was a weapon, and that a species could be both warlike and worthy of existence. You presented an idea that their logic could not compute, that a species could change, that our potential for war was not a certainty of war. You showed them a future where we reached the stars not as conquerors, but as partners. A future they had never considered. A future their rigid system had dismissed as impossible. Your message was a seed of uncertainty, planted in the heart of a perfect machine, and it was starting to grow. The Elder, one, confronted an impossible variable. Its entire existence was based on a single, unwavering principle: Eliminate potential threats. For eons, this principle had been its guide. It had never failed. It had never been questioned. Until now. You had shown it, humanity. A species that was a walking, talking contradiction. To destroy humanity now would be to admit their logic was flawed. If they had misjudged us, how many others had they misjudged? How many worlds had they extinguished based on a faulty calculation? To fire their weapons was to shatter the very foundation of their identity. The perfect gardeners would become nothing more than cosmic vandals. They would be the very chaos they sought to destroy. The Arbiter's dilemma was absolute. Their logic had trapped them. The fleet waits in orbit. It has been 3 days. They are motionless and silent. The sun glints off their dark hulls. They are a constant, terrifying reminder of the judgment that was passed and the sentence that was stayed. Humanity has looked into the abyss, and the abyss blinked. You are still connected to the crystal. You can feel the confusion from the flagship. The Elder, One, is locked in a loop of logic it cannot break. It cannot leave. It cannot attack. It can only wait. The ghost chorus is silent. The old silence of extinction has been replaced by something new. A tense, uncertain silence. A silence filled with a single, unanswerable question. Humanity has become that question. We are the paradox. We are the flaw in the code. We are the problem the arbiters cannot solve. We do not know what they will do next. We do not know if we are safe. But for the first time in a very long time, the universe is listening. And we have a voice. The new silence is not an ending. It is a beginning. The trial of humanity has just begun.